and I thought I won. I thought I did enough to get the victory over a spectacular fighter. I told y'all from the beginning, man, that
Lamont Roach walked into the Barclays Center as the underdog, a fighter who had already been counted out by many. He left the ring that night, however, with the respect of fans and critics alike, but not with the win he so desperately deserved. His performance against Tank Davis was nothing short of spectacular, but instead of celebrating a career-defining victory, Roach was left shaking his head in frustration. What should have been the moment when Roach shocked the boxing world and proved his place among the best in the lightweight division turned into a controversial draw that many felt was nothing short of a robbery. The fight had everything fans could hope for. The underdog fighter taking it to one of the sport's brightest stars, hard punches exchanged, and moments of sheer drama that had the crowd on their feet. But when the final bell rang, the judges scored it a majority draw. One judge had it 115-113 in favor of Tank Davis, while the other two scored it 114-114, resulting in a decision that preserved Tank's undefeated record but left Lamont Roach feeling robbed. For him, this wasn't a draw, this was a loss, and it was one that left him furious with how the fight was handled, particularly in the ninth round. That ninth round would become one of the most talked about moments of the night. In a shocking sequence, Tank Davis, who is known for his devastating knockout power, was clearly stunned by a clean jab from Roach. His legs buckled, and he dropped to a knee. For many observers, including Roach himself, that was a knockdown, plain and simple. But the referee didn't call it. Instead, Tank was allowed to recover, and no points were deducted. That decision alone could have changed the entire outcome of the fight. If that knee had been counted as a knockdown, the round would have been scored as a 10-8 for Roach, giving him a significant advantage on the scorecards. Instead, the fight continued, and Tank was able to survive the round and eventually make it to the final bell. The controversy surrounding that moment wasn't just about the referee's call. It was about the implications of the decision for Tank Davis' undefeated record. Roach believed that if the knockdown had been counted, he would have won the fight. After all, he had clearly outwalked Tank throughout much of the bout, landing more punches and showing a level of skill that many had underestimated before the fight. But instead of getting the credit he deserved, Roach was left to watch as the judges handed down their decision in favor of preserving Tank's perfect record. For Tank, the frustration was evident. While he never made excuses for the decision, it was clear that he didn't feel as though he had won the fight. He admitted that he hadn't performed to his usual standards, and he understood the criticism coming his way. Tank's trainer, Calvin Ford, acknowledged that Tank had made mistakes in the fight. He pointed out that Tank had been too passive in the early rounds, letting Roach control the tempo and dictate the pace. Ford noted that Tank could have done more to assert himself in the ring, and that the fight was closer than anyone expected. Tank himself admitted that he hadn't locked in the way he should have. He knew he could have done more, but he also recognized that Roach had stepped up and made him work harder than he anticipated. Tank had started slow, and Roach was quick to capitalize on that. Roach landed jabs, threw more punches, and made Tank adjust his game plan throughout the fight. For a while, it looked like Roach might actually pull off the upset. His boxing was crisp and precise, and he showed no fear of Tank's power. Then came the moment that truly stood out, the ninth round when Tank Davis took a knee. The shot from Roach was clean, and while Tank tried to brush it off by claiming it was a result of hair grease dripping into his eyes, it was clear to many watching that the jab had landed with significant force. For the first time in his career, Tank Davis had been forced to take a knee in the middle of a fight. That moment alone made people question whether Tank was as invincible as everyone had believed. As Roach continued to push forward, landing more shots, it was clear that Tank wasn't getting the same kind of dominance he was used to. And that's where the frustration began to build. Roach had worked tirelessly, landing more punches and taking control of the fight. But the referee's failure to call the ninth round knockdown and the subsequent draw on the scorecards left many wondering if Tank's undefeated record had been protected, no matter the circumstances. Roach wasn't just fighting Tank that night, he was fighting the system that seemed to protect Tank's image and preserve his marketability as one of boxing's biggest stars. It wasn't just Roach who felt this way. Many in the boxing community, including analysts and fellow fighters, voiced their displeasure with how the fight was handled. Ryan Garcia, who had been vocal about his support for Roach, criticized the officials for their failure to call the clear knockdown. Shocker Stevenson, another top fighter in the lightweight division, backed Roach, declaring that the fight was a robbery and that Roach had been the real winner. Even the legendary Terrence Crawford took to social media, roasting the judges for their incompetence and questioning the integrity of the scoring system. Isaac Cruz, a fighter who had fought Tank Davis in the past, was equally impressed by Roach's performance. He too felt that the ninth round was a 10-8 round in favor of Roach, and he stated that if the judges had done their jobs correctly, Roach would have won the fight without debate. It was clear that, in the eyes of many, Tank had been exposed in this fight. For years, he had been seen as an unstoppable force in the lightweight division, with a 30-0 record and 28 knockouts. But Roach had shown that Tank was vulnerable. He wasn't invincible. This realization opened up new possibilities for the lightweight division. Fighters like Shocker Stevenson, Devin Haney, and even Teofimo Lopez now saw a blueprint for how to beat Tank. The question was no longer whether Tank Davis could continue his reign as one of boxing's top stars. It was now about how he would respond to the challenges that were bound to come his way. The blueprint had been exposed, and it was up to Tank to prove he could make the adjustments necessary to remain on top. But what about Lamont Roach? For him, the fight was far from over. Roach wasn't just fighting for a victory, he was fighting for recognition and justice. He felt as though he had been robbed, and he was determined to make sure the boxing world knew it. A rematch with Tank Davis was something he was eager for, but this time it wasn't just about winning the fight, it was about making sure the world knew he had been the better fighter. Roach wanted to prove that he could not only defeat Tank Davis, but that he could do so on his terms, without the interference of questionable refereeing or biased scoring. For Tank, a rematch was necessary. He had to prove that the first fight was a fluke and that he was the dominant force in the lightweight division. His reputation was on the line, and while he wasn't completely shaken by the draw, it was clear that he needed to prove to himself and the boxing world that he could bounce back and dominate. Tank couldn't afford to let this moment define him. He needed to step up and show the world that he was still the knockout artist everyone had once believed him to be. In the aftermath of the fight, both Tank and Roach expressed their desire for a rematch. Tank knew that the draw was not a perfect result for him. He needed to settle the score, not just for himself, but for his fans and his career. For Roach, the rematch wasn't about making a statement or proving something to Tank. It was about getting the justice he believed he had been robbed of in the first fight. As the boxing world continued to debate the outcome, one thing became clear: Tank Davis had been exposed. He was no longer the invincible force everyone thought he was. And Lamont Roach, for the first time in his career, had shown that he belonged at the top of the lightweight division. Now, the question was whether Tank could rise to the challenge or if Roach would have the chance to finish what he started. No matter the outcome, one thing was certain: this fight had changed everything. Tank Davis' undefeated record was no longer as solid as it once seemed. And Lamont Roach had made it known that he wasn't just another fighter. He was a contender, a true threat to the throne. The boxing world would be watching closely to see what happens next. Will Tank rise to the challenge and prove that he is the real deal? Or will Lamont Roach get the justice he deserves in a rematch that could change the course of his career forever? Only time will tell, but for now, the boxing world is left to wonder. Did Tank Davis escape with a draw, or was Lamont Roach the true winner that night?